The chart that we're looking at here is really about long-term holder supply and what it's looked like over the last few months. So the way we're looking at the market is a lot through the long-term holder supply lens. And so that is a definition from Glassnode looking at when a coin is designated to be a long-term holding supply coin. And so their classification is when a coin is dormant for 155 days, and that's really statistically unlikely for that coin to come back into kind of the short-term holder supply. It can, but that's kind of the classification that we're looking at. And so over the last few months, what has been the key development is we've been hitting all-time new highs in long-term holder supply, but we're starting to see this potential peak and kind of flattening out of that curve over the last few weeks. And so we'll get into some of the next slides of why that's key and important. But we're starting to see maybe the potential peak as we head into the next couple of months into the bull cycle. So when we think about that peak and that potential flattening out over time, that's been a really bullish development for price and what it's going to do next, and a good indicator in telling us what might happen. So really what happens, the dynamic is we see long-term holder supply. We see this accumulation period where we saw this bear-like accumulation period over the last few months for long-term holders. And then as we climb up in price and new market entrants enter, we start to see long-term holders take some level of profit. And because that group is, over 70% of the circulating supply, it's not just people that are holding coins for 3, 4, 5 years. It's also people that might look to take profits at certain levels as well and sell their coins to these new market entrants that are coming in. And so typically every time we've seen a long-term holder supply peak, it comes right before new all-time highs, and that's exactly where we're at. The other key thing to note here is every time we go through these periods of peaks and troughs in long-term holder supply, we always end up higher than we were before. So more long-term holders holding coins, not just for a cycle top, but holding them for longer over time periods as well.
I think a good kind of point to make here is that the long-term holder supply is what drives the parabolic price action, right? It's just, they're just engineering a supply squeeze. There's just not enough free float of coins to go around for these new market participants. And as the price goes parabolic, you start to see just naturally some profit taking from people that are 1,000% in the money or more, or maybe a little less. But this kind of huge accumulation we've seen from the long-term holder supply since the top in April is what's actually driving that it's almost like a bear market accumulation, but that's what's going to drive this next leg up. And I think some people mistakenly get it the other way and say when long-term holder supply starts to draw down, it means a bull market is imminent, but it's more so that this is kind of what we see when the bull market kicks off. And so from what this chart says, we're still in the really early innings.
Yeah, well said. And another way to look at that dynamic is on the other end of something being long-term holder supply, we have short-term holder supply. So we can look at the ratio of those two, which gives us, a kind of a supply shock ratio of the market when we have the market heavy in long-term holder supply over the short-term holder supply. And typically we see these ratios peak out right before this price action ensues because of that kind of supply dynamic squeeze pushing down less free float supply on the market.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite indicators because it kind of adjusts for that circulating supply, right? So we're still in the kind of the early days of Bitcoin. There's about 19 million coins in circulation, 18 point something, almost 19. But during the early years, as the inflation rate was much higher, that even if long-term holder supply was increasing, you could have this ratio decreasing. But when you normalize it for long-term and short-term holder supply as a ratio, we see that we're honestly in one of the biggest kind of supply shocks we've ever seen. So gives us the indication that some fireworks may start soon.
Yeah, and just one more way to look at that, it's you can look at it from the kind of long-term holder circulating supply chart, but you can also just see kind of the rate of decrease. This is just looking at the long-term holder net position change from the previous month before. So we can start to see kind of a deaccelerating trend in terms of long-term holder accumulation. where, you can see like kind of rising in the green here is more increased accumulation from the month before. And the opposite, we have more selling and in net position change, or kind of those coins leaving long-term holder supply in the red. And you can see in that red is right when long-term holder supply is offloading more to the market, is in that kind of profit-taking behavior, or when that price is ripping up.